Hey everybody, it's your old pal Mr. Wargaming. Thumbs up in the chat if you can hear me okay. Sometimes I start recording and then this darn fool thing takes a little while to kick in. And unfortunately for today, I am recording this live. Hey, you know what I could do? I'm recording this live. I'm going through this StreamYard thing, and you'll have to forgive me. I've been working crazy long hours at work lately. Got the old laptop set up here, and we can just jump on YouTube and take a look and see what's showing up live. I'm not seeing any live viewer comments. So, hey, there we go. Looks like we got at least one viewer. And because I'm using my cell phone, I don't know how any of this stuff works. We can go to, so here's some of my favorites, right? Old Storm of Steel. You got to like that guy. We're going to talk about this one here a little later. This is Rule of Carnage. If you're not following Mike and Glenn, Mike is the genius behind Gaslands, Billion Suns. They talk about plot armor and the difference between stories and games, and that's a very important distinction between those two hobbies. The whole point of today's episode, I know you saw the big thing. I know you saw the title screen. We're going to be talking about this bad boy right here. Yep, we're going back to Sneedville. Simon Hogwood. What is it, an Acer? No, it's a Gateway actually. It's a little cheap $200 guy, and it's missing half the keys because I own birds. We're vamping a little bit here. We're just kind of that's the confirmation I needed. We're just kind of waiting for the crowd to pile in. The doors are unlocked and everybody's ready to come in. While we wait, before we get to the Sneedville, I'll show you. I picked up some loot from the store the other day. Now here locally they banned plastic bags. You got to pay 15 cents to use. Actually, it's not, plastic bags are banned, but apparently game stores, this is not a bag that you purchase. It's a promo item. So I'm going to be sticking my groceries in that one. Anywho, look at this. I went ahead and picked up some Chessex dice, some red and blue. You're going to be seeing those coming up. So now I've got a full set of 12 of each color. We'll keep a couple of oddballs just for, things like initiative and when we want the bright yellow. But they'll show up great on camera. And then when we're doing our Dragon Rampant and I picked up a copy of Rebels and Patriots. We'll have a Force Red, Force Blue. That'll make that a lot easier. And I thought, while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and pick up a couple of bright D20s that should be visible from the camera. And man, they really are. The red and the blue show up great, except it's one of these dice. See, there's the one. Look at this. It doesn't have a 20 on it. You can roll a weird white hand looking thing. Or on the blue die, we roll I don't even know what that is. It's like it's a sword, cross sword and shield. Yeah, that's great. I don't want to roll a white hand. I want to roll a 20. But here's where we get to the good stuff. This is what you might find very interesting. I picked up this back issue of War Games Illustrated. This is the June. Oh, this isn't. Oh, wow. This is relatively recent for my take. June 2022. It says up here in the corner, free Warlord Epic Battles. And it did come with a sprue of Bavarians. Now, I don't play the Warlord game, so I need to find somebody that could use this, that I can send it to, and they don't live like halfway around the country, and I got to pay like $40 to send it to them. So we'll figure out how to put that to good use and keep it out of the landfill. We care about the environment here. We are absolutely conservationists. My latest project, this bad boy right here, sent to me by Superfan. Mr. Dan sent me, this is the Black Raven, and I've been working on it. It looks really good, man. I got it down to the blank canvas part, except check this out. Just an ivory, I spray painted it white, and then I put an ivory on it, and then I gave it a nice sepia wash, and then I brought out all these panels in bright white, except for that one right there. Every time I look at this thing, I find another white panel I missed. So now it's time to get to the fun. Like I said, it's a blank canvas, and we got to put some fun details on it. I got to do the missiles there yet, too. So this is a cargo hauler, and you can see the universal cargo container underneath. Now, when you buy one of these, this comes to us from Coruscant. It's a resin figure. It looks really good. It does come with a flight stand. It's a big, heavy lead plate that it sits on about that high off the tabletop. And it also comes with little squares that you can put in here so it wouldn't be landed. But I figured, you know what? And then this, you can hinge this so that it opens and closes. I don't know if you can see in there, you can't. I'll have to take a picture under better lighting someday, I guess. There is a door back in there. So this you can put closed, and it even comes with a couple of little options here for a smooth finish. So I use the gun, but it has little almost like erasers that you can put on there for a nice smooth rounded finish. So it's a little less warlike. But and you could even paint these and swap them out if you want. But I felt better just sticking them in there and being done with it. Keep it open because I'm going to be using this on the tabletop. And if we take a look, just to give you a really good impression of exactly how big this is, this one is scaled for 15 millimeters. And so if I dump a 15 millimeter Napoleonic on there, he's coming out of the ship saying, gentlemen, I have met the enemy and he is alien. So there you go. That's the, I can't remember what they call it. It's like a light hauler or something. Coruscant miniatures. What a fantastic, had a heck of a lot of fun. That's going to be the Black Raven for us. So that should give you an idea what I'm thinking about painting. Let's go check the comments and then we'll dive right into Sneedville. Sneed's Seed and Feed, formerly Chuck's. Why, I have no idea, Deese, what you're talking about. I just randomly generated. And in all seriousness, I randomly generated the location. Sneedville was right in the center. You can't stop the Sneed. You can only hope to contain it. Ban plastic bags. Yes, the great state of Hawaii decided that they did not like seeing plastic bags going all over the place and floating in the ocean. And it was too hard to enforce anti-littering laws. So they just said, we'll just ban them all together. And it makes everything worse. And you have to have a Sherpa when you go to the store now because there's like 8 things you have to remember. It's kind of annoying. But, and not only that, but they charge you 15 cents. The stores are required to charge you per bag. So if you get the brown paper bags, a nickel of that goes to taxes. It's crazy. What setting is that from? Comes the question from Ronos22. What setting is this? I don't know. I think it's an original. I think it was designed by Joe Coruscant, the man who runs, I don't know that's his name. It's called Coruscant Miniatures. And I think he designed this. It works great as a light cargo hauler for anything you care to name. I think what's the Stargrave is the one that, or no, not Stargrave. What's the latest from 5 Parsecs from Home? I think they encourage you to have a starship like this because the setting of that game is the crew of a ship like this. But it would work great for Traveler or, pretty much anything. I mean, you could even justify using that in, well, any 15 millimeter game anyway. What setting is this from? So we're doing an Imaginations campaign, and I think we got enough guys in the room right now. We got 15 guys. So let's go ahead and just kind of go over what we've done so far. The first shots have been fired in anger. Let me move my laptop out of the way. That's got our numbers, and I'm going to show you what our numbers are before we decide what the ultimate battle is. We actually have 2 things to resolve here, and I'm trying to find the best way to keep the glare off of this for you guys. The dotted line separates Knoxville territory from Kingsport territory. Kingsport is invading Knoxville, and all these little discs are armies. And if we tilt it down a little bit, you can see the blue armies are coming out of Kingsport. The red armies are coming out of Knoxville. Notice that Knoxville has 5 different units on the board. They have smaller armies that are going off and doing all kinds of fun little adventures. In the meantime, and they're kind of on the periphery, in the meantime, Kingsport has really grabbed the center of the board. So they're in a very strong position right now. However, they do have a little bit of a problem that they've got a force that is coming down. And we're going to talk about this one first. You've got an army, and we're calling that the Harlan Blitz. So the 2 little communities up here, Harlan and Everts, are right up here. All of the infantry and cavalry have swept around the border, and they're trying to punch through Big Stone Gap. This ridge divides our campaign in, well, it separates the campaign into a couple of distinct sectors. The only way to get over that ridge is via Cumberland Gap, Pennington Gap, or Big Stone Gap. So this little unit, it's just 1 regiment of infantry and 1 regiment of cavalry, has decided to storm through Big Stone Gap and start mucking about in the backfield. Maybe pull one of these armies back. Take some of the pressure off the guys over there on the front lines. The problem that they ran into is that the defenders of Big Stone Gap know the territory, and they put it to good effect. Now, we only had 1 guy run that fight. I ran that fight in the last episode using the siege rules in the solo wargaming guide, and then I also ran it using Henry Hyde's wargaming campaigns. And the result for wargaming campaigns was that our invaders surprised the defenders and took the place without a fight, no casualties. However, this is not my campaign. I'm not running this. This is a group campaign. I'm just the arbitrary GM. I just wanted to show how well these siege rules work, how this little mini game supports this larger campaign. Caleb Hines, he sat down and he said, wait a minute, I've got 2 orders of battle. I've got 200 defenders going up against, well, 1,300 attackers. However, the terrain is squarely in favor of the defenders. So even though these guys in the Big Stone Gapians are militia, we should still play out a genuine fight. And so I'm going to click over here. And I hope this shows up at least a little bit. This is the map of Big Stone Gap. Here's a Big Stone Gap down here. And then there's, you know, you come through the valley. Now ignore this straight line right here. This is cut by the power lines. They cut the forest back from the power lines for fire control hazards. But if you look right in here, and maybe I can even zoom in a little bit more, what we notice is there is a broadening. So there's a river, a road, and a railroad today that run through this area. But this little bow in the stream makes for a fantastic location. The militia from Big Stone Gap know the army is coming. They hear rumors trickling over the border. So they're able to get their 200 boys right here into this little bulge, if you will, throw up some breastworks and defend the territory that way. Using volley and bayonet, it looked like it should still be a walkover. Now, bear in mind that because of the narrowness of the valley, you're only going to be able to throw the 1 regiment of foot at those defenders. Suddenly, the 1,300 doesn't matter, except that you can throw wave after wave after wave. And what Caleb found in the battle that he played out, the defenders actually threw off the attackers. The attackers launched, I think it was like 3 or 4 waves of attacks and couldn't break the line. Now, I want you to remember, this is happening on September 28th, the same day as the next battle that we're going to talk about, and that's the one that we need to decide what's going to happen. So right now, we know that the miracle of Big Stone Gap is that these militia have defended the frontier for a day. Now, in Caleb's estimation, it really was a miracle. All of the dice rolls came up right for Big Stone Gap. All of the dice rolls came up wrong. Like if any one of the dice rolls had gone the other way, then it would have been a walkover. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take that for what it is. Big Stone Gap, they held them off for a day, and they were able to deliver a pretty substantial number of casualties to this understrength regiment of the Harlan Blitz. In this campaign, when you fall below 375 men, so regiment is 750. If you fall below half strength, you're out of the campaign. You can't have any more effect. Starting out with 600 boys in that regiment means that the 113 casualties inflicted by the defenders knocks these guys down to, what is it, 487. So they've already lost like half of their troops that are available to them. In other words, once they suffer 375 losses, well, wait a minute, not for these guys. These guys only have a cushion of 225. Of that 225, they've lost 113. They lose another 113 guys, they're out of the campaign. At least that regiment of foot. There'll still be some horsies running around back here causing trouble. But the point is, that's canon now. The Big Stone Gap held them off for a day. The next day, we're going to use my results to keep things interesting. The next day, these guys do maybe a false retreat, whatever it is. They do take Big Stone Gap. That's on the 29th. On the 30th, they're going to have to pause to secure that village for the Knoxvillians. So that's what's going on up in the north. A lot of damage was done here, but there's still a going concern. Not sure what's going to happen with these guys after the 30th. The next thing we have to look at is this battle down here, the Battle of Morristown. Give you an idea what happened. This is the army of the orange flag you see here is the Knoxville, and see it's red. This is the Knoxville Army of the East. This is the major army of the West. The one with the Jefferson on it. See, Jefferson City. This is the largest, most powerful army in the Knoxvillian Armory. You've got a smaller force up here holding Pennington Gap. You've got literally just, I think it was like 600 men right here that are waiting for an opportunity to sweep into Sneedville. Right now, here's Sneedville. Right now, Sneedville is defended by a fairly substantial army. This is Jones's army. Wait, is that? Yeah, Jones's army. So you got three equal armies, and they're about the same strength. So the point is, the Army of the East was mustered in White Pine, and they moved up to defend Morristown. So this army, Rogers' army, came down to Morristown and was met by the Army of the East. And that's the battle that we've had three different guys fight out for us, and they came up with three very different results. Given the fact that the army started the day equidistant from Morristown, there was a very real chance that one or the other could get there first. In actuality, I think the Kingsports, they probably had the shorter line to go, but the only way they could get into Morristown was by crossing this bridge. This is Lake Cherokee right here. And filtering the entire army over that bridge, I think slowed them down enough, because all three of our contestants fought their battles in and around Morristown. And we talked about those in great detail in our last episode last Monday. By the way, when I can have an episode this Monday, like I said, I'm just working like 60 plus hours a week. I'm pulling third shift, so it's just been a little bit crazy here in the House of Wargaming. But what we will do, and that's why I wanted to get this done today, is taking a look at the vote tallies. And these polls are run on the YouTube in the post. You have to go to the community tab for those of you that have wanted to participate and you weren't sure how to do that. You have to go to the community tab. And what we see today is that Caleb Hines, now when he ran this battle, what have I done? It's a touch screen. When he ran that battle, he found it was an overwhelming victory for Kingsport. Raptor's Bunker had an overwhelming victory for Knoxville. And David Lee, he did something a little different. He said, you know, I'm going to send the cavalry up, lickety split. And he ran a smaller engagement using 1 hour war games that was very heavy on the cavalry. So we've got three very different outcomes, and we need to decide which one is going to be canon now. And before we do, I want to thank all three of our contestants, if you will, all three of our bros for taking the time to do that. As you can see, Caleb Hines, 45%. So if it's 1 through 45, Caleb's Morristown will be the one. If it's, oh boy, 29% and 26, we got to do a little bit of math there. If it's 74 or higher, it's David Lee, and anything else, it'll be Raptor's Bunker. So here we go. This one's for all the marbles. 74. So I think we do the math, up to 45, up to 74, it's going to be Raptor's Bunker. That's going to be our, here, just to show you, I ain't cheating, there's 74. So Raptors, so we've got to thank Caleb for doing the Biggest Stone Gap for us, and Raptor for doing the Battle of Morristown. Now, one other thing, and I think we can even come over here. If you guys want to participate and play along, check out the Sneedvillewar.blogspot.com because that's where I have all of the army lists. In fact, maybe now that we've already looked at that, I can bring that up. And there's a couple of different pages. Now that we know that here's what it looks like for the tails from the Raptor's Bunker. And if we click on to bring those pictures up really big, sometimes it could be, oh, you know, it's not going to work. I'm using my cell phone in part because my Wi-Fi doesn't reach the bedroom. Oopsie. Well, what are you going to do? So he took the opportunity, he took the time, he sat down and he worked out casualties for us. And so we're going to be able to plug and chug those. I'm not quite sure what the outfall of this is going to be, but we can take a look and we can say, the morning wore on, the Kingsportian infantry formed an attack column to try to break the enemy lines on Cemetery Hill, which is located just southeast of the crossroads. Routing the White Pine line who had formed up just as the detachment was being driven off, securing the hill. Their success was one of the few bright spots of the Army of Rogersville's day. half their forces had routed. It would take some time for the general to recover them. Well, what does that mean, routed? I'm going to have to take a look at how they routed off the table. They may be routing north to Bean Station. They may be routing to the safe into the arms of this army in Bull's Gap. But that's one of the things where campaigns become interesting. The aftermath of this battle may be a complete victory for the army of the East. But they have another army that's the same size right here. They don't know what they're doing. They're a day's march away, maybe even less than a day's march. But what that means is normally in a case like this, where our victorious army has their enemies back against a long linear feature like Lake Cherokee, and the retreating army has to jam their way through one small bridge, you might see a total army wipe. The problem is that Knoxville can't afford to do that. If they throw all of their cavalry at the retreating army and put them to the sword, they're leaving their flanks wide open for this army. So that's going to be a big part of the calculus of what the reaction of the army of the East is going to do now that they have a solid victory under their belt. As I said, that's the results of the 28th. The 28th was a repulse. The 29th is a day of licking your wounds and reorganizing and getting ready to pursue. And for the army that lost, Roger's army, it's going to be a day of retreat. And then on the 30th, that's when we're going to have new orders issued. September 30th will be a day of new orders. But the other thing we have to do is figure out, and this is what I wanted to do live as well, I want to see what the next week's random rolls are going to bring. We have been using Henry Hyde's Wargaming campaigns as a sort of ersatz chance card. And somewhere in this book, I probably should have bookmarked this before we got started. Somewhere in this book is a table, the percentile table that you roll to see. There it is right there, random effects table. So we're going to roll on this to see what, and I want you guys to know what that random effect is going to be, because we're going to spend the next week. Well, I'm going to spend a few days figuring out the aftermath. I'll throw together a quick video saying, okay, here's what we're looking at. Here's what our options are. And then we need to start talking about, well, what are the Army's responses going to be? But I think I should probably calculate what the losses are and see where everybody stands. I'll update the sneedvillewar.blogspot.com so you can take a look at that. And I'll do it in a post, and then I'll update the pages with the armies on them as well. And then you guys can start thinking about, do you think it's time to commit the Army of the West? This is the biggest, strongest force. Is it time to bring the Army of the Pines that's up here in Middlesboro, although they did come down south into this town just south of Cumberland Gap? Do we unify these two forces? Do we dump this understrength regiment in here and have them take on Sneedville? Right now, as it stands, Kingsport could squat in Sneedville to the end of the campaign, and if they're not thrown out, that would be a campaign victory for Kingsport. Can they wait? Do they bring all three of these forces together? I mean, the Harlan Blitz here, they're going to have to punch through Duffield and Jonesville to get down there. They are a lot further away than you might expect. It's, as the crow flies, it's probably only a 3 or 4 day hike. But because you have to wander through all these little narrow valleys, it's going to take them, I mean, assuming good weather, assuming that they're okay, I mean, it's going to take them a week. So maybe that's the thing to do, is marry these two and then bring all three of these to hit Sneedville from either side. I don't know. We'll talk about it. We'll throw some more polls up. I'll put together 2 or 3 different scenarios, and you guys can vote on that. And then likewise, does Kingsport now want to commit the Green Army to try and take out this army as well? Maybe these two guys can come down and lay siege to Knoxville, keep their enemy's backfield pinned in place, so until we see what happens over here in the north. I don't know. So we've got some options here. Either way, I want you guys to know what's going to happen. Starting on the 30th, we're going to have to make 1 random roll. As I said, this is a percentile check, and anything from 26 to 75 is nothing happens. If it's 1 to 25, it's a bad thing for the army. If it's 76 or higher, it's a good thing for the army. Let's find out. We'll go with right to left, left to right as we look at it. Knoxville is going to roll, and they get a 61, which is no effect. So nothing for Knoxville's army. And then we've got an 86 for Kingsport. Oh, how the fortunes have changed. Kingsport gets an 86, and that is not only are local bridges in good condition, but your troops find additional fords. Any troops within 5 miles of your commander-in-chief may cross any water courses without the usual penalty for passing a defile. Well, that's interesting, given that this army is delayed on the 29th from crossing Lake Cherokee. So for the next week, that's an important thing to remember, that Kingsport there's probably a better way to do this, because we don't really have a commander-in-chief. Our commander-in-chief is way back in Johnson City. Additional fords. Armies may cross any watercourse without the usual penalty. So that's really going to be more of a judgment call, I think. Anybody crossing a stream or a river, and maybe if we have another battle in the following week, that could come in important as well. That is only applies for Kingsport. Oddly enough, the invading armies, maybe they have great pontoon bridges. We'd have to come up with some way of explaining what that die roll means. We may have to, have a little story to provide additional context. If you guys are going to fight a battle from the 30th to October 7th, then you guys may factor that into the tabletop battle. Hey, it turns out the Green Army, as they come down, they have pontoons with them, so they're able to cross bridges. Or when it comes time to deploy, if there's a river in the way, and during normal deployment, you may say, you know what, I'm going to allow the Blue Army to deploy on the wrong side of the river because they found these fords. So that's one of the great things about this book for inspiration. It does add additional new wrinkles to all of your campaigns, and it gives you something fun to sit down and think about and explain away. And that's really the next thing we need to talk about. We need to come up with a story for why the Blue Army has that advantage. Before we do that, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these comments. I want to welcome you guys that are just joining us for the first time. And those of you that are commenting for the first time, Darius, hello from Poland. Ranos, he likes the magnets. I used to be a big diplomacy fan, and I had one of these made up with all of the armies and everything. So this way we can keep track. I have a couple of spare flags, the little blue too, for my Blue Army. And because generally I like to handle 3 armies is enough for logistics to try and track. I've got 5 for the forces of red, unfortunately, but again, 2 of these are tiny little forces that don't have a lot going on. Although, the tiny little force, this Blue Army cannot march on this red army without risking this little force marching up the road and retaking Sneedville. That would be a problem. So sometimes these little forces, these little raider forces, can have they can punch well above their weight. We're hoping for Biscotti. Those army markers make great. Oh, they do make great bird toys. You know what else makes great bird toys? Typewriter keys. I have to. Everything is just so. I have to have a spare typewriter now. Typewriter, keyboard. Charles Latoro, welcome to the channel. Tennessee has way more varied terrain than I would have thought. Cumberland Gap here played a very important role in the a little shindig we had here in these United States of America. You might have heard of it. It was called the U.S. Civil War. What am I hearing here? I thought Biscotti was knocking on my door. This whole area really does drive strategy. In fact, the area up here to the northwest is really mountainous. It's really, that's where those Tennessee, this is the part of the country where those Tennessee mountain boys came in. I mean, we're in coonskin cat territory, and it takes a special breed, a hardy breed of feller, to scratch a living out of this mountainous terrain. There's a reason why this is where these guys, they really, within the United States military, they punch well above their numbers. These are those old stubborn Scots-Irish who live to fight. Can't believe the Army of the East won. Not for crossing a lake. Well, I'd have to read it again. It just says bridges and streams. I guess you can't really ford a lake, although I encourage you, go take a look at what this crossing of the lake looks like. This is one of those typical mountain lakes where they built a dam and they just flooded a river valley. Remember the Tennessee Valley Authority? For those of you that aren't familiar with American history, they basically the federal government decided that we needed more energy in the region, so they came in and they kicked thousands of landowners off their land because they said we're going to drown it so we can build a nice little lake and put a hydroelectric dam down here at the foot. And it was very controversial at the time. But for whatever reason, this is one of those valleys that got dammed up. And if you look over here at this Narrows, there's multiple crossings there. And there are opportunities for fording this lake. I mean, it's not a round lake, you know, it's a drowned river valley that kind of narrows and pinches out in a lot of different places. So it's a good point, though. It's a good point. We'll take a look at that. Purple Druid presents Wargame Culture. He's one of the other guys doing high level campaign stuff. If you haven't checked out his campaign carnival, if I wasn't already hip deep in this, I would have loved to have done that. It's a 4-part series in which 2 armies face each other. It's a little more narrative than this, but it does have a lot of, you got to pick your forces early, and the choices you have at the start of the campaign can have big ramifications down towards the end of the campaign. Very interesting way to do it. It's a little more than just a mere narrative campaign. And I say that as a compliment because, you know, we in our hobby have gotten a little bit sloppy when it comes to narrative campaigns. You know, a smarter man than I would have had something a little better for you. There's a conversation going on in miniature war games these days about games and stories and how those two overlap. Before we get into that, I want to tell you a little story, all right? And this is why this is important. Trying to come up with a deeper understanding of this hobby in which we are engaged. These things matter. Words matter, and we need to understand what it is we're doing. So I want to talk to you guys about the difference between miniature war games and stories. But before I do, I want to tell you a little story about my dog. My dog is named Bruce. He is a Doberman Rottweiler mix. And, you know, I got a dog. He's a great dog. Honestly, he's a handsome guy, little long in the tooth. He's got some gray hairs, and he's not as smart as he thinks he is. Relatable. So I'm a dog enthusiast, and I'm a member of the dog club, and we go down to the park every week, and, you know, we do what dog enthusiasts do. And the people in that club, you know, people that are involved in hobbies a little too deeply generally tend to be a little weird. I think you guys can relate to that. And it's not just our hobby. It's not just dogs. Like, I used to do triathlons. There's a bunch of weirdos in that hobby. Bird enthusiasts, don't even get me started. But there's one guy in particular at the dog enthusiast club that it really confused me because he'd been interested in dogs for a long time. And he actually had like a Patreon where he was giving people advice about dogs. And but he always had a new dog in hand. And a lot of people were like, I know he's good at dogs because he keeps adopting a new dog, and then he has another one and another one, and he just keeps cycling through them. So I had an opportunity at the club to ask him. I said, John, his name is John, which may be confusing, but just roll with it. I said, John, why do so many people come to you for advice when you don't seem to be able to ever find the perfect dog? All of the dogs that you have serious structural problems. And he said, let me tell you, John, because, I mean, that's my name too. He said, I tell you, a lot of people kind of like dogs, but I really like dogs, and I'm on the hunt for the perfect dog. 40 years I've been doing dogs, and I haven't ever found the perfect one because I've never been able to find a dog that chases mice and meows, and a dog that poops in a box in the closet and chases string. And I said, whoa, time out. You know, I think I see what the problem is. That's a cat. And his face fell, like you could see he was really annoyed. And he said, hey, I don't know what you have against dogs, but you need to knock that off. You need to stop being so judgmental. And I got a little confused. And I said, whoa, no, I really like, I like dogs, but I like cats. Cats are fine. I'm just not a member of the cat enthusiast club because I prefer dogs to cats. And he said, you know, this is not your place to tell me how to enjoy dogs. And I thought, well, wait. And I tried to explain to him. I said, look, I'm not trying to wreck your fun here. I think I'm actually trying to help you. What you need to understand is that all of the things you're looking for exist in a thing called a cat. And I will even help you find that cat. We can go down to the pet store right now. In fact, because we meet at the park, there's a whole bunch of cats over there that the government doesn't want you to know this, but those cats are free. You can take those cats home if you can catch them. I know some ladies that got 12 cats at home. And then he got so mad, he just was just furious with me. And it was starting to cause a scene, and I backed off. I don't want to cause a scene. This really mattered to him way more than me. I thought, you know what? if you want to enjoy dogs in this weird way, who am I to criticize? Well, that was my first mistake, because when I came back to the next meeting a month later, the guy walked up to me carrying an animal, and he was really smug. And he said, "Hey, listen, pal, bucko, I've got the perfect dog here. It does everything that dogs should do. It meows. It scratches up all of my furniture. If I sleep in late and I forget to feed it, it takes a dump on my chest. It chases mice. So what do you have to say about that now, mister?" And I said, "You're holding a cat." And some other people had come up around us, and they got really annoyed with me. And one of them said, "Hey, John, they're both furry, so I don't know why you're trying to exclude him from the dog lover club." And I said, "Well, I'm not. I'm mostly because he doesn't have a dog, right? And I don't know why you've got people that don't have dogs." And he stopped me. He said, "Hold on there, Buster. I'll have you know that I went down to the pet store and I paid a premium for this dog. It said dog on the box. The guy assured me this is a dog, and it's exactly the dog that I need." I said, "But that's a cat." And then it was a whole big scene, because other people were like, "Why are you being so mean? We want to grow the number of people in our dog enthusiast club." And John, if the way to grow the number of people in this dog enthusiast club is to welcome people with non-traditional dogs, then what's the problem? What's the worst that can happen? And I threw my hands up and I said, "Listen, you guys go ahead. I'm just going to go over here in the corner and enjoy my dog." Because Bruce is a pretty good dog. Well, I took my eyes off the ball and I skipped a couple of meetings. And when I brought Bruce back to the next meeting of the Dog Enthusiast Club, boy, he had so much fun. I can't even tell you how much fun he had. He just started chasing everybody else's pets all over the park. And everybody got mad at me, and they said, "Why are you letting that stupid animal chase all of our dogs?" And I said, "Those are cats. You brought cats to the dog club." And they all got really mad and said, "You're being so judgmental, and maybe, because you don't respect the diversity of dogs that we have here in the dog club, maybe this isn't the club for you." And I said, "Well, I mean, but those are cats. So yeah, I guess I'll go." So what I did is I went off on my own and I started the dog school renaissance, this little quiet corner of dog enthusiasm for people that, and I'm thinking, guys, my animal hasn't changed in the 30 years I've been bringing dogs to the club. My animals are all the same. You guys have all started bringing cats. Why am I the bad guy here? And so look, we've gone on a little bit too long. You guys aren't stupid. You're miniature war gamers. I don't need you to explain this to you, but sometimes we have 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons players come by and you watch the video. So let me spell it out for you. I'm not talking about dogs and cats. Okay, I'm talking about a lot of different hobbies. Like Dungeons and Dragons used to be role-playing game, and the dog of Dungeons and Dragons has now morphed into the cat of story time, happy, fun, trophy time for all. Okay, not interested in that. I'm interested in Dungeons and Dragons. Video games used to be, can you hit the right button at the right time? Now it's a political sledgehammer that is told via choose your own adventure stories using a video game console as the interface. Hobbies shift over time, and not always for the better. I hope that the dog of miniature wargaming does not morph into some other hobby. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about, storytelling, because the conversation is kind of burbling along beneath, and you guys know, you're on YouTube, you're watching miniature game YouTube channels. So before I go any further, there's something, I can't believe I have to say this. This is one of those, it goes without saying, except for a lot of people, you have to say it. I'm not judging anyone's hobbies here. If you like cats, that's great. I'm not telling you it's wrong to like cats. I'm not telling you you're a bad person for liking cats. If you bring a cat to the dog enthusiast club and demand that everyone calls your cat a dog, then I'll call you a bad person. And bear in mind, when we talk about what is a miniature war game, the definition is a little more fuzzy, because this is an intellectual exercise. Everything we did today is a word game. God, I even hate that phrase. But what we're doing here is I got to back up a step now. But let me just say that if you don't take this the wrong way. I'm genuinely trying to help you, okay? And I want you guys to understand that there are 2 different activities that you can't do at the same time. One of those activities is miniature wargaming, and one of them is telling stories. They are two different mediums. They do two different things. You can't be playing a game and painting. This might be a little easier for people to understand. Painting is an important part of the greater miniature wargaming hobby. No doubt about that. If you bring painted miniatures to the table, you're doing things, you're adding a layer of interest and literal and figurative color to the hobby. It's an important supporting activity that fits under the wider umbrella of the hobby, but it is not the hobby. If you're painting, you're not playing a game. Likewise, if you're telling a story, you're not playing a game. What we have to stop and think about these things at a deeper level. Someone will come to you and say, you know, your hobby would be way better if you focused on this supporting thing. No, don't make the hobby less of what makes it great. Focus on what makes it great. The game is the thing. All of the story that we've told about Sneedville is a story that is a flying buttress supporting the tabletop miniature war game. Okay, guys? What's the difference between a story and a game? Well, with a story, you have a beginning, middle, and end. You have setups and you have payoffs. You have control over what's about to happen within the story. And you may be lying about what happened, but a story is a linear thing that you have control over. With a game, you don't have control. When you abandon the control, when you abandon the control of a story, that's when the game starts. We're telling a story about this, but we had some level of uncertainty. At a certain point, you stop telling the story, and then you have the what's going to happen. We could take a more generic view of the hill. We've all used books as hills. Don't judge me. There's a red army and a blue army, and we're going to tell the story of which army wins, but we're going to fight a battle, and we have to see what happens first, right? Did the red army take it? Did the blue army take it? And then after the battle is over, after the certainty has been established, now we know what happened. Now we can tell the story. If you sit down and say, here's a red army and a blue army, and I know the red army is going to take it, well, that's a story. That's not a game, right? And this miniature tabletop activity that we engage in, where you and I sit across the table and we figure out whether the aliens win or the British redcoats win, that's a game. Here's the dirty little secret. A lot of the people that are pushing storytelling into and as a replacement for the miniature war games can't handle the competitive nature of games, and they are hopeful that they can exercise control over the hobby. The dirty little secret is that every single human endeavor has storytelling as a supportive element of it. Fishermen, when they're fishing, they're not telling stories. But when they get back on shore and they tell you about that whopper that got away, now they're telling stories. The stories are part of the hobby. And if somebody ever walked up and said, you know, fishing would be way better if you concerned yourself less with catching fish and more with the stories about catching fish, they'd be laughed out of the room. And yet when people come in and say, you know, your game hobby would be way better if you put the focus on the stories first. If you designed the game to tell the story and did less of the game, they're not laughed out of the room. And I honestly don't understand why, except that these are good, hardworking, decent people that are good-natured, and they're willing to let outside elements creep into the room and start injecting small doses of change, just a little bit here, a little bit there, and hey, you know, like I said, it's a fuzzy boundary around the hobby. You know, is 3D sculpting part of the hobby? Well, I mean, somebody has to sculpt all these beautiful figures, don't they? Right? Somebody had to sculpt this. Is this part of the hobby? Yeah, sure. But I could just as easily say, here's my spaceship. And I could play the exact same game with that. I need a miniature representation of my spaceship. And whether I use a nice carved thing or a three-dimensional or a simple cutout, a card cutout showing the table space taken up by spaceship, I'm still playing a game, right? I can take the sculpt out. And that's what I mean when I say stories, painting, sculpting. I could just use counters. These are not vital to the exercise of playing the game. Don't let anybody tell you that you should focus more on the stories. Again, I can't believe I got to say this. Look, I have been having the time of my life using this big tome to generate stories, to build entire worlds, imaginations, if you will. But this is in support of a greater purpose, miniature war games. Focus on the games. Make sure that when you're doing the creation, what Donald Featherstone calls domestic wargaming, all of this prep work should be driving towards the goal of making your tabletop games better. You understand? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the comments, and then we'll call it quits for the day. Hello from Canada. Hey, Hasdrubal. Welcome. Yeah, we're going international today, aren't we? Lackey almost feels like he's not really talking. See, Lackey gets it. I almost feel like he's not really talking about dogs. No, Dart Mart. He wants a dog that identifies as a cat. Oh, you're taking it even one step deeper. See, it's insidious, man. If they can get you to admit the one thing is not what it really is, then they can get you to admit anything. Don't let them do that. Right here, I've said it before, and that's a big part of why I wear this in my videos. If you want your games to excel, you have to embrace the good, the beautiful, and the true. And when someone tells you, we're playing a story, no, you can't play a story. You tell a story. There's different verbs for them. There's different words for them because they're different things. Now, to be honest with you, this is a philosophical conversation, right? What is, to war game or not to war game? That is the question. And the way we come at these some philosophical answers is by using our God-given reason. And unfortunately, bridging the gap between understanding, your understanding and my understanding of a miniature war game, we have to use that imperfect tool of language, particularly the English language. It's not a great tool for this, but it's all that we got. Ranos22 wants an RPG that poops in a litter box. Wait, what are we talking about here? Hey, if you have to have one that poops, make sure he's going in the litter box, yeah? Is there national flags for the King's Portions and Knoxvillians? No, there's not. And this is by Hasdrubal. And by the way, one other thing, I can't believe I forgot to mention this so late in the day. We need some names for the generals and the leaders of all of these units. I'm going to ask you guys. Oh, man, I should have done this way earlier so you could be throwing these out right now. Nominate a force. Give me a name so that we can start plugging names onto these guys. I'm not going to read them out in the chat. We've only got a few more minutes. Throw them at me on Twitter. You can find me there. There should be a link in the description at not John Mollison. Or, like I said, the Sneedvillewar.blogspot.com. If you have a battle and you want to present it, the best way to reach me, at least as far as Sneedville is concerned, is going to be just throw a comment. Just throw a link in the comments on that blog. And go ahead and throw comments on the blog or either here in the live stream. Give me some names for these generals. Keep it clean, guys, right? We try to run a family channel here. I don't need Crunchy McButt Nuggets or General McGeneral face. Actually, that could be kind of funny. I don't have a problem with funny. Just keep it clean. That's all I'm asking. Paul Bally games seem to insert storytelling into gaming. Well, hold on now. Time out. Because you have to remember that these things all scale. That you can stop and you can inject little moments of story into a game. But Paul Bally is first and foremost a game. If I wanted to, I could strip out all of the color and run just a generic fighter shooter trying to do a thing. A classic example of this is the new, who is this? Mike Hutchinson? Is he the one that's doing Perilous Tales? Man, I'm turning into a Mike Hutchinson fanboy here, which is a bit like Paul Bally, but it's solo. And you have threats and you have agents, and you can skin it however you want. But the game is the thing. And Paul Bally, it's a fun game, don't get me wrong, but when you're playing the game, you're not telling the story. And this is what we do to add context and meaning to everything we do. I'm going to roll some dice. Hey, this force here is on a hill, and they're being overwhelmed by superior numbers. The only way they'll survive is if I roll, above 90. And look, I rolled a 96. Oh, they survived. That's great. Moving on. No, wait a minute. Time out. We're going to add context to this dice roll. This 96, why did they stand? Because they rolled the dice. But you and I sitting across the table say, wow, I guess they had their Wheaties today. Or, geez, I guess all of the propaganda worked on those guys. Or I guess they're just too dumb to know when they're licked. We'll tell a little bite-sized story in the middle of our game. But again, if I paint blood spots on my guy because he took a wound, I'm not playing a game, I'm painting, right? So you gotta keep in mind that there is that distinction. And while the borders can get a little bit fuzzy from time to time, don't let the stories overwhelm the games, all right? Yeah, the story emerges in the AAR. If you're nudging the game to make a better story, you're just listen. If you want to tell a story, tell a story. I have said this to DM's faces because that's the approach that modern D&D takes. Is I'm the DM. I've prepared a story. Now you, as the player, have to guess which hoops to jump through. And if you get off the story, in fact, there's a lot of ink spilled in the D&D channels about how you can fool players into thinking that they're playing a game when they're really just walking down your pretty hallway. In other words, hey, you come to a fork in the road. Do you want to go to A-ville or B-town? And the DM knows that whichever way they go, they're going to go to the exact same town. The only thing that changed is the name of it. Like he has a town, and whether it's called A-town or B-town depends on which way they go. They didn't have a meaningful choice. And if they rolled dice to decide which way to go, that die roll is meaningless. And if the dice roll come up and you don't like it and you change the die roll so that it is the story that was supposed to happen, why did you even roll the dice? You're not playing a game at that point. Dice aren't the only way to add randomness. And not all games have randomness. Although, maybe they do. I mean, even chess has a little bit of randomness at the start as far as who gets to go first, right? There's a certain amount of unpredictability. Fog of War. Let's amend that a little bit because I can think of a game that doesn't have any randomness. Man, does it? Does Diplomacy have randomness in it? Because Diplomacy, there's no dice. It's all about the orders, and it has Fog of War. But if everybody agrees on who gets to have which nation at the start in 1900, there is no randomness. The only randomness may come down to if you randomly assign powers to people, right? So again, the borders are a little fuzzy. I'm not trying to come up with any grand unified theory of wargaming. I'm just cautioning you guys to be on the lookout for snake oil salesmen. Not this. I'm just giving you something pretty to look at. Henry's not a snake oil salesman. There's a lot of great information on this, on how to add stories in support of the miniature war games, but all of this is in support of miniature war games. If you like world building and you don't play miniature war games, the miniature war games will only interfere with your process. They will limit you in ways that are not appropriate if you're world building. There's a whole hobby for world builders out there. There's forums and groups and clubs. Go join them. And I don't say that because I'm trying to gatekeep you. I'm genuinely interested in you pursuing your interests and doing it in a way that is healthy for everyone. Be honest about what you're doing. All right, guys? Moving along, Lackey, the longest way to say I like pushing miniatures around rolling dice I've ever heard. Well, that's right, Lackey. This is the longest way to say it. But every once in a while, you have to sit down and think about this stuff at a deeper level. Otherwise, if you don't have that foundational understanding, you got to build your house on a foundation of rock, not sand. And if you let people shift definitions around under you, one day you'll wake up and you won't have a hobby to stand on. Let's see. Lackey says that's not a criticism. There's a reason I watch this channel. Yeah, it's probably for all the free giveaways, right? And then Hasdrubal suggests Hugh Jars. Thank you, Hasdrubal. Very nice, very mature. Diplomacy has the randomness of who talks to who first. Oh, does it? It's honestly, I will bow to your superior knowledge. 99% of my experience is with a thing like this, playing via email, where you had 3 days to get your orders in and you could just fire emails off to anybody you ever wanted to. But yeah, it's a good point. It's a fair point. Do you guys have any questions for me? We're coming up on the 1 hour mark. I've only got a couple of minutes left. Like I said, if you're watching this on the replay, go ahead and nominate an army and a leader and throw that into the comments, and we'll roll that into the next video. We're going to sit down and run the numbers on these. see which way the army of Rogers retreats. And yeah, I think that's about it. National flags would be neat. We'll get there. I've got all kinds of fun little stuff. For the record, for those of you that are playing along at home, I made a silly little sharps that the BBC, the University of Tennessee volunteer caps on them, and somebody pointed out, oh, so Knoxville is the British Army, and I thought, well, okay, so that's why I have red here for my little army discs. So if you're interested, if you're playing along at home, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it'll help everybody keep things straight if you're using British figures for Knoxville and French for Kingsport. So and again, every time, so I have another meme where I have the French old guard, but instead of wearing the bearskin caps, they're wearing raccoon skin caps. I mean, that's going deep into American history. And then all their little ammunition boxes had like features from Kingsport, little touristy like style features, or businesses from Kingsport. And I'm learning a whole lot about this part of the country I've never been to. And I'm using that as my inspiration. So the old guard for Kingsport, they're wearing coonskin caps. Like, oh, what's his name? I'm drawing a total blank now. The guy that fought at the Alamo. Help me out here, guys. Wow, you went robotic there all of a sudden. Mirroring flags would be hilarious. Well, this is largely the flag of Tennessee. I think they have a red. Let's see, there's a couple of stars in there. What time period is the campaign set in? Well, we're tracking. Here's a question by Doug Noble. I am tracking horse, foot, and guns. I don't care what that means to you. Every unit of foot is 750 men at full strength. Every unit of cavalry is 750 men at full strength. If you wanted to take the orders of battle for one of these fights and say, all right, great, I know it's this many guns, that's artillery. My cavalry is either light armored tanks or, so if you want to do like Korean War era red versus blue or World War II, that my infantry regiments, I'm going to treat those as, and I'm not a World War II guy, so I don't even know what it would be, companies, was 750 men. Is that like 3 companies or whatever? If you want to distill it down, however you want to do that, that's fine. It's your table. All I ask is at the end of the fight, go ahead and give me the casualty list with respect to that 750. I think Caleb Hines, because he's using volley and bayonet, he actually translates everything into strength points first. And then, so when he gets an order of battle that says X number of infantry, he translates that to strength points. Like in the case of this fight up here in Harlan Gap, or at Big Stone Gap, excuse me, he said, okay, 80 men is 1 strength point. So the defenders had 2.5 strength points. And then he translated the strength points into volley and bayonet. And again, I don't have any experience with volley and bayonet. I don't need to. You just write it up and tell me what the results were, and we'll add that to the next poll for the next fight. Davy Crockett, that's the one. Yep, Davy Crockett's the one I'm thinking of. He was born on a mountaintop in Tennessee, which is the greenest land, the greenest state in the land of you and me. Boone and Crockett. Go visit a tour bus of Sneedstream War battlefields. Confuse the locals immensely. Yes, that would be great. If we could all get together and rent a bus and just go on a tour of where all of these fights were fought. This turns out was the Battle of Cemetery Hill. In fact, we may have to change that. The Morristown fight, they were fighting over right there was the critical geographic feature was the Alamo. Boone was not at the Alamo. I don't know what I was thinking. How many? Simon Hogwood. That's fine. That's fine. For figures, Hasdrubal is using Napoleonic Saxons for Knoxvillians and Spanish as King's Portions. Thinking of running a battle using Rebels and Patriots on Tabletop Sim. I would love to see that. If you do a battle on Tabletop Sim, post it. I would love to watch that. And Dartmart, how many in a unit of calves? 750. The ratio differential here is that we have about 5 regiments of infantry for one regiment of cavalry on both sides. It's about a 5-to-1. So, and I'll also point out when I run these fights, and this happens in miniature war games a lot as well. If you have a regiment of infantry for Napoleonics, like I believe they would have like an associated, they might have a couple of guns in support of them. So, we kind of lose that and abstract that out of our tabletop battles. And our batteries for these armies are largely like grand batteries that are trundling along the map. Doug Noble, I thank you for appreciating that. Maybe Boone was in stealth mode. Oh, Bowie. Maybe are you thinking of Jim Bowie? He was at. It wasn't Bowie at the Alamo. This is what I love about this hobby. There's so many people that are so much smarter than me. I mean, I get there with the philosophical stuff, but believe me, honestly, I had to record that 3 times because there was an interesting Twitter thread on that got me all riled up. Oh boy, they pushed all my buttons, and I recorded. And I thought, nah, I'm coming on a little too strong, coming out a little too hard. Take it down a notch. We're all on the same team here, guys. We got to keep pulling on the same rope in the same direction. We are well over an hour. I'm going to go ahead and bail out, guys. Like I said, I am working the late shift down at the paper mines, and I got to get some sleep before I head in for another long slog. But thanks for coming along for the ride today. I do really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you guys helping, educate me on, the difference. But you're helping me remember Davy Crockett and all of this stuff, and the fights that you guys are doing. I mean, honestly, let's Bunker. He was playing like on his carpet. He doesn't have the nice green, beautiful mat and all the wonderful figures that you see on like the bigger channels. But this is a judgment-free zone. It's all about the game. I want you guys to get better at painting. I want your terrain to look better all the time. We're going to help each other do that. But at the end of the day, all about the game. Do the best you can with what you got, just like we do in life. And we're here to tell you that's a great job. We might have some advice to help you do a little better next time, but we know low time preference hobby here, guys. We are willing to take a lot longer to prepare to engage in our hobby and to invest the time to write the stories that make the game worthwhile. That's all I got for you today, guys. I'm praying for you.